I've come to a stark and painful realization. Owen lacks any semblance of responsibility or compassion. It's clear to me now that I must take action to reclaim my life. I've decided to stay in this house with my parents, and Owen will need to leave. Ever since we got married, he has leaned on me for everything. Despite my best efforts to support our family and the fact that I pay $4,000 a month in rent, Owen has had the audacity to try and push me out of my own home. This is my breaking point. For months, I've wrestled with the idea of divorce, but Owen's selfishness and his sharp, dismissive remarks have solidified my decision. I told him, with unwavering determination, I will leave this house, yes. But for now, you need to go immediately. Owen shrugged as if my words were nothing. Fine, I'll be out tonight and back tomorrow evening. Just make sure you're gone by then, he said nonchalantly. The nerve of him. I pressed him further, asking, Don't you care to check what I might take with me? His response was so dismissive it left me stunned. Don't touch my equipment. Do whatever you want with the rest of the stuff. His apathy was jarring, but it left me resolute. If he is so indifferent, then perhaps it's time for him to experience the consequences of his actions. He's giving me free rein to handle the household belongings, and I intend to use this opportunity wisely. I've already begun planning, and if necessary, I'll hire movers to pack up the things that matter to me. This chapter of my life marks a turning point. For context, here's a bit about my situation. My name is Erica. I'm 31 years old, and I graduated from a prestigious program. I work as a researcher at a well-known company, and my career is both stable and rewarding. On paper, my life might appear ideal. I have a good job, a comfortable home, and a family. Owen, my husband, and Sam, our son, make up what might look like a picture-perfect life from the outside. But the reality is far from perfect. The $4,000 monthly rent is a heavy burden, even with my decent salary. What makes it even harder to bear is Owen's refusal to contribute meaningfully. At 32, he's still chasing the elusive dream of becoming a musician. When we first met, I admired his ambition. He was full of promise, performing at small venues and events. Back then, his potential seemed limitless. But entertaining a few hundred people doesn't pay the bills, and now, his dream of making it big feels more like a fantasy than a goal. Meanwhile, I've been left to shoulder the harsh realities of life. My patience has worn thin. His part-time jobs barely make a dent in our expenses, and his dismissive attitude toward my concerns only adds to my frustration. Whenever I bring up the financial strain, he scoffs, calling me nagging or an old woman with all your complaining. But I'm not complaining. I'm stating facts. I've carried this marriage and our family for years. My patience and support were unwavering at first, but Owen's refusal to change has forced my hand. Divorce is no longer a distant consideration. It's now the only way forward. I deserve a life free of constant financial worry and belittlement. Sam deserves a stable, secure home, and I refuse to let Owen's choices continue dragging us down. This decision, though difficult, is necessary for my well-being and for Sam's future. When I look back, I see how young and naive I was. I married Owen at 20, thinking we'd build a life together. When I became pregnant, he promised to work hard for our family. I believed him. I thought he'd let go of his music dreams and focus on us. But nothing changed after Sam was born. Owen continued chasing his dream, working part-time jobs, and clinging to the idea that fame was just around the corner. I confronted him countless times. How long do you plan to keep working part-time? You're almost 32. People your age are building careers. His response was always the same. I have my own way of living. Don't compare me to others. I was stunned by his stubbornness. Your words sound nice, but they mean nothing if you're not contributing to our household. If you want to talk about living your way, start by helping with expenses. But Owen always found an excuse. When I make it big, I'll make up for the money I'm not earning now, he'd say. I tried to be patient. I tried to believe in his dream. But the years went by and nothing changed. His band broke up. His income remained unstable, and the other members moved on to stable jobs and marriages. Yet Owen clung to his dream, dismissing the sacrifices others made for their families as pathetic. I disagree. Giving up your dreams for the sake of your family isn't pathetic. It's responsible and meaningful. I've reached my limit. Owen's promises have proven hollow, and I refuse to spend another day waiting for him to wake up to reality. I'm ready to move forward, to build a life where I'm not weighed down by his selfishness and illusions. This is my chance to reclaim my independence, to create a future where Sam and I can thrive. Starting over is daunting, but it's also liberating. I know I'm capable of building a happy, secure life without Owen holding us back. And so, I take the first step into this new chapter, resolved and ready to embrace the life we deserve. Owen's obsession with appearances was starting to wear thin. Expensive clothes again? I asked, trying to keep my frustration in check. Looking good is important for my job, he replied coolly, brushing off my concern. It was almost laughable. At nearly 32, Owen still hadn't earned a single dollar from his so-called music career. Yet here he was, posturing like a star, spending every spare cent on flashy outfits and equipment we couldn't afford. 11 years had passed since our son Sam was born. During that time, Owen had clung to his dreams, flitting between part-time jobs and empty promises, while I carried the financial weight of our family. The endless cycle of his spending sprees and my pleas for practicality had become exhausting. I wish you'd spend less on all this and help out with the household expenses, I told him one day, my tone tinged with exasperation. You can't satisfy hunger with pretense, he snapped back, his arrogance as sharp as his wardrobe choices. Our arguments had become a regular occurrence, usually muffled attempts in the small apartment we shared. But the walls were thin and Sam, now 11, often overheard our raised voices. That's when the idea of moving to a bigger place came up, ostensibly for Sam's sake, but also for our sanity. Hey, this place is getting cramped for the three of us. Should we move? I asked Owen one evening. Yeah, he said nonchalantly. This was your place before we got married anyway. Maybe it's time for a change. Do you have a problem with that? I asked, watching his face closely. It's not a problem, he replied with a shrug. But I'd like to live in a high-rise condo. That'd be cool. And who's going to pay for it? I challenged, raising an eyebrow. I'll help with the household expenses, he said, as if that were a bold declaration. You handle the rent and I'll cover electricity, gas, and groceries. Please, I really want to live in a condo. Despite my skepticism, his words sparked a faint glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was a nudge he needed to start contributing. Okay, I agreed cautiously. But since I'm paying the rent, I get to pick the place. Deal, he said. As long as it's a high-rise condo, I'm fine with whatever you choose. A year after we moved into the sleek condo that Owen had dreamed of, reality hit harder than ever. He hadn't kept a single promise. The $4,000 monthly rent weighed heavily on me, and Owen continued his pattern of shirking responsibilities. Every bill, electricity, gas, groceries, fell back on me. His promises to help were as fleeting as his ambition. Hey, the gas bill came in. Make sure you pay it before it debits my account. I reminded him one evening. I'll give it to you next time, he said casually, as if next time wasn't a hollow excuse I'd heard 100 times before. When is next time, Owen? You always say that but never follow through. Do you even realize how much stress this puts on me? I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. All you ever do is fuss about money, he shot back, his defensiveness cutting through the air. It wasn't just his financial irresponsibility. It was the lies. One day, he asked me for $100 to take his parents on a trip. Deep down, I knew it was another excuse to fund his whims, but I handed him the money anyway, too drained to argue. Meanwhile, I struggled to keep our home afloat, sacrificing any chance to save for Sam's future or even my own retirement. Thoughts of divorce, which had once lingered faintly in the background, were now becoming harder to ignore. Then Owen dropped a bombshell. "Hey, we've got an unused room, right?" I was thinking we could clear it out and make space for my parents to move in, he announced one evening, as if the idea were perfectly reasonable. "Your parents? Are you saying they'd move in with us?" I asked, stunned. "They're getting older. We can't just leave them alone," he replied, trying to sound noble. I couldn't believe his audacity. I was already shouldering every responsibility in our household. Now he expected me to take care of his parents too? "I'm against it," I said firmly. "Don't answer so quickly. Think about it," he pressed. "I have thought about it, and my answer is no," I said again. "Why are you so heartless?" he snapped. "What's wrong with taking care of family?" I stared at him, stunned by the hypocrisy of his words. The problem wasn't his parents. It was Owen himself. If they moved in, I knew he'd dump all the caregiving responsibilities on me, just like he had with everything else. "Fine," he spat, glaring at me. "If you won't take care of my parents, I'll live here with them. You can leave." That was the moment I decided I'd had enough. For years, I'd tolerated his selfishness, hoping he'd change. But now, his blatant disregard for me and our son left no room for doubt. "Fine," I said calmly. "I'll leave." "Good. Be gone by tomorrow evening," he said coldly before storming out. The next morning, with Owen out of the house, I began packing. As I worked, Sam emerged from his room, his face solemn. "Mom, I'll help you pack." "I'll go with you," he said softly. His words broke my heart. No child should feel responsible for their parents' pain. Yet Sam, having witnessed years of tension and arguments, had grown wise beyond his years. "Start with your own things," I told him gently. "I have something else to handle." Before leaving, I made a call. I had a plan to deliver one final message to Owen. By evening, Sam and I were settled in a business hotel, with only the essentials packed. When Owen called, his voice filled with confusion and anger, I let him rant. But I knew this time I wasn't coming back. When Owen arrived and saw the empty house, his voice trembled with disbelief. "All my clothes and equipment are here, but everything else is gone. Where are the tables? The fridge? Did you take them?" "No," I replied evenly, refusing to rise to his tone. "I called a junk removal service and had them clear out everything else. By now, it's probably been burned or scrapped." Owen's panic deepened. "Sam, are you here too?" he called out. When Sam responded, his confusion turned to outright shock. Perhaps he didn't expect Sam to still be around, let alone witness the house stripped bare. "What do you mean everything's gone?" "The furniture, the appliances. Those are marital property," he snapped, his frustration mounting. "You told me I could do whatever I wanted with everything except your equipment," I reminded him calmly. "So I did. How am I supposed to live now?" His voice cracked, as though the realization of his dependence on me had just hit. "If you need furniture, you can buy some," I replied dryly. "In the meantime, use your amp as a chair or wrap your guitar in a towel for a pillow." "That's not funny," he barked. "How could you do something so cruel?" "It's not cruelty, Owen," I said firmly. "We're getting a divorce." His face tightened, as though he didn't expect to hear me say the words so plainly. He seemed to think this was just another spat that would blow over, but he didn't know I had already made up my mind. "Really? Divorce," he repeated, as if testing the word in the air. "Yes," I said again, my voice steady and unyielding. "We are getting a divorce." He hesitated, seemingly stunned by my resolve. "You don't have to keep saying it," he muttered, his tone now laced with disbelief. I knew Owen well. He never backed down from his words, even if he regretted them later. For years, he had hidden behind his fragile pride as a musician, but his bravado no longer moved me. After years of carrying the weight of our marriage, I was finally letting it go. A few days later, we met at the real estate office to settle the condo agreement. I smoothly ended my part of the contract, the process quick and unceremonious. But when it was Owen's turn to sign a new agreement, his face drained of color. "The rent is for $1,500, he stammered. Disbelief etched across his features. "Years ago, when we moved into the high-rise condo, Owen left everything to me, choosing the property, negotiating, signing the paperwork. He hadn't even bothered to ask about the rent. He had no idea how expensive it was. "I can't pay that," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Even with my parents' help, there's no way." I met his gaze calmly. "You've been living here for years without ever considering the cost. Yes, I've been paying the rent on my own because you don't work. We haven't been able to save a penny because of it." The real estate agent looked at him sympathetically, but shook their head when he asked about transferring the lease. "An irregular income of $2,500 per month isn't enough to qualify, even with parental support," the agent explained. "You see," I said, turning back to Owen, "you can't afford this place, and now you can't stay here." His lips quivered, frustration overtaking him. "You knew I couldn't handle this rent, and you still went ahead with everything." "You told me you didn't want to know the details," I reminded him. "I trusted you to take responsibility, but now it's clear you can't." "I'm not leaving," he said defiantly, his voice shaky but stubborn. "If you refuse to vacate, the police or the property owner will be involved," I said matter-of-factly. "It could get messy for you." His defiance crumbled, and he left the office in silence, his pride bruised. I turned to the agent and apologized for the inconvenience, ensuring them the house would be empty soon. True to my word, the condo was cleared within days, leaving behind only echoes of our past life together. The divorce was finalized shortly after. With no savings or assets to divide, the process was straightforward. My son chose to stay with me, while Owen, now 32, struggled to find his footing. His parents, weary of enabling him, cut off their support until he found stable employment. For the first time in years, Owen had to face the reality of his choices. Unable to sustain his music career or afford even a modest apartment, he was forced to confront the consequences of his dependency. As for me, I found a new apartment affordable, cozy, and perfect for my son and me. Without Owen's weight dragging us down, I could finally redirect my finances toward building a stable, fulfilling life. I don't fault anyone for chasing their dreams, but I've learned the importance of balancing dreams with responsibility. Now, my son and I live in a home filled with peace and stability, things far more valuable than any fleeting fantasy. For the first time in years, I am truly free.